All right, so we've started some videos, we've been showing a few things here and there, and you might be wondering, okay, now what? How do I get started in Flesh and Blood? Sean from Shield Wall Gaming here, and thanks for giving us a chance. We've come up with several videos for Flesh and Blood already. We compared it to Magic in one video. We've kind of done a little recap of it. I have one that talks a little bit about the card anatomy. I've had multiple people already from our club especially say, okay, well, show me how to play. Like, how does this work? So I've linked them to several videos, and there are some amazing videos, and I've linked them in other videos as well. I've linked where those how to plays are. And I'm still getting, yeah, but okay, I get those, I've seen those, but can you do a video? So that's really cool. It's kind of our first main request on, hey, yeah, but I'd still like to see a how to play in your style. And so that's what we're going to do. So let's go down to the table where we have a little better view, and let's at least learn the quick start version of the game and kind of the high level 30,000 foot view of what does my turn look like and what does an opponent's turn look like. Okay, so down at the table now, and sorry for the glare on some of the cards. I sleeve my cards, and there's some reflection on the lighting, but I'll pull cards up to the camera when we need to. So what I was going to do, like I said before, let's just go through the quick start rules, and that is the rules that you need to really just kind of understand and learn the game kind of out of the gate and what you need. To start off, the quick start says, don't worry about equipment. So I'm not going to go through equipment in this video because if you were just doing a quick start, if you're going to go to a welcome event and you're using one of the welcome decks, you won't have any of this. But know that equipment are cards and items that stay on the table that you can use at any time throughout the game, and you can activate them, some of them at certain times, some of them as instants, which mean anytime. And so we will pull these away, and that's something that I'll let other videos kind of talk about. You start your game with a hero and a weapon. Some heroes have multiple weapons. In the new sets coming, I think some heroes are going to have different weapons that do different things. Obviously, right now in the entire game, there are 4 heroes, and there are 4 different weapons. For the welcome event especially, or any quick start, you're going to start with a young hero. And this is Dorinthia. This is not the quick start deck. This is her pre-con deck, or her starter deck. And so what you'll notice is you have in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got a blue symbol down there that stands for intellect. And you have a green circle in the bottom right that stands for her health. So this is called a young hero. A young hero is basically for faster games. That's going to be things like sealed and limited, and certainly the welcome events where you want to play a game in 20 to 30 minutes as you're learning it. Constructed decks are going to use mature heroes, or I guess advanced heroes or experienced heroes, and everything's the same for them. This is Dorinthia's experienced hero. It's just she's got 40 life. So beyond that, everything else is the same. Her effect is the same. I'm not going to go through a lot of the effects on the cards today because if I were to try to explain the effects on all the cards and how they all work and interact, that's going to take a long time. I'll kind of leave that for you and other videos that are going to be coming out, and other videos that other people have released to kind of explain some of that. We're going to talk about what does a turn look like and how do I play. So if we look at the weapon, you can see basically it's got a cost once per action. Once per turn, I use an action, and then I can pay a resource and attack. And we'll talk about actions and attack and resources in a moment. And then at the bottom left, it's got an attack of 3. Anytime there's a little yellow spear on any of the cards, that means you attack with this, and that's what you're going to do. So the first things first, when you're putting this together, you're going to shuffle all the cards that you have into your deck, and you're going to keep track of your life somehow. We can just use a spin timer or a spin counter for that. This is a magic one. There's all kinds of fancy ones. You can write it down however you want to do it. We also have some loose dice nearby. And one of the things we did when we started playing, because as you go through this game and you do a lot of back and forth and interaction with each other, sometimes you can forget or lose track of how many resources you spent. So we actually I have a bunch of these for other board games. We actually use some of these where whenever we need resources, we would just, if I were to get 3 resources, I would just throw them out in front like that so that I knew how many I had, and then I'd move them to the side as I spent them, and then it just kind of kept track for me what I needed. You don't have to do that, and we don't really use that anymore, but it's just something that's good to have. So the board area is set for the quick start game like this. And then what's going to happen is right after you've determined who goes first, both players are going to draw 4 cards. And then the starting player, and for us it's going to be us, the starting player is going to go and they are going to get 1 action. Now this is important, and a lot of videos make this distinction. You get 1 action per turn. So you get, on your turn, get to do 1 thing basically. So if that means I'm going to attack, I'm going to pay this resource and attack, there's my action. There's one exception to this that's very important, and it's the term go again. Go again means you get another action. It doesn't necessarily mean you attack with the same thing or whatever. It just means you get another action. So here's a good example I saw in here. There's a card, Driving Blade. So Driving Blade is an warrior action, as you can see in the bottom. We're going to talk about card types in 1 second. And it says your next weapon attack this turn is going to gain +3 attack, and also it's going to gain go again. And then again it says on the bottom of that, go again. So that means after I use my action, I get to go again, and my weapon's going to gain go again and +3, if that makes sense. So if I was starting off and I wanted to attack right out of the gate, this is going to be a great card to attack with. So how I would do that is I'm going to pay a resource cost. So if you look, in the upper right hand corner is how much this card costs to play. You can see here, Iron Song Response doesn't cost anything. It's a different type of card. But what I would do is I would play an action out of my hand. Now, I can't play Iron Song Response because of the card type it is, but that would be my action, and we would pay the resource. How do you pay the resource? The upper left-hand corner, and I did a video on some of the card anatomy. It was a short one on the rarity and what the color coordination and resource management means and the pitch costs. So you can kind of look at that if you want to, and I'll link to that. But if the number of dots is the resources that you can gain if you pitch the card, so they're multi-use cards. So in this example, if I pitched Iron Song Response, I would gain 3 resources, and now I'm ready to go and continue. So that's how I would say. I'd say I'm going to pitch Iron Song Response, and then I'm going to continue. And for my action, I am going to pay 2 resources, and I'm going to play Driving Blade. And so I'm going to put this up on the chain. Now, I have a Journeys to Middle-earth map for the board game. I don't have the actual play mat, so I apologize. What we've been doing is just using this crease in the map as the chain, and it works fine, and it's a great background. But for right now, that's what I'm using, and so I would play Driving Blade. That means that I'm going to get +3, and my weapon's going to get go again, and I get to go again. So I have another action right now that I can use, and I've got 1 resource ready to go. So before we go any further, let's talk about the card types. So there are basically, there's several different card types. There's instants and things like that, but I pulled some out here. And there are basically, so this is an example of a generic action that is a potion that you can put on the board and it stays out on the board. There's also actions that are auras that when you put it out on the board, it stays out on the board. Your main actions are going to be cards like this, which says at the bottom, Brute Action Attack. So this is an attack card. This is going to be a card I can play from my hand, pay the cost, and attack with that card. There's also just straight brute actions. So just like this Driving Blade is a warrior action. Only warriors can play it. This one, only brutes can play it. And so that's just a straight action card. That means it does something for me to set me up for my attack potentially. And then there are reaction cards. So there are, and we're going to talk about that in the phases, there are attack reaction cards that allow you to play during a certain phase, an attack reaction. And there are defense reaction cards that allow you to play during a defense reaction. So those are kind of the basics. I think there are a few other types of cards as well, but for right now, that kind of works to explain there are different types of cards that you can play in different phases. Any type of warrior action or attack action you can play at any point. So if I were to continue this turn and say, okay, so now my weapon gets 3 and it gets go again, I could choose I am going to attack with Dawnblade. Now Dawnblade says, if you remember, it says once per turn action, I can pay a resource and I can attack with it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to attack. I'm going to pay a resource. I'm out of resources currently. And as a reminder for the opponent, what's coming their way, this has a +3. And it also has go again from this card. So we would kind of link these together on this part of the chain. So this is chain link 1. We could continue to go. There could be chain link 2, chain link 3. So here's an example. I could do this, and I'll say that is my attack. So what would happen now is, that's the attack phase. And then now we would move to the defense phase. So there's a very distinct word in Flesh and Blood that is very important to learn, and that is the term play. What does play mean? Playing a card means paying its cost and playing it from your hand or from the armory. And we'll talk about the armory in a second. You need to play a card, you have to pay its cost. Now sometimes the cost is zero, like in Iron Song Response. It says 0 cost, so I could play that from my hand. But you have to be able to play a card. During the defense phase, you're not playing a card, you're defending. So the opponent could could defend with Primeval Bellow. What that means is we're going to ignore all of this stuff because it doesn't matter, and we're just going to focus on the defense number right here, and it's 3. So he could say, I'm going to defend with 3. Now I'm doing an attack of 6, but he's going to defend with 3 there. So now there's possibly 3 more going through, but the attack's not over yet. At this point now, we move to the attack reaction phase. So I get to react to his declaration of defense. So now if I had a card, so let's say I was able to pay the resource of 1, and I had this, I could pay warrior reaction, this warrior attack reaction, and actually I could pitch a card from my hand right now and get more resources. So I could pitch Signal of Solace, I could get 3, and then I could pay 1, and I could do an attack reaction. So that's going to add 2, and I also will then, there's another rule here that is reprise, and if anybody defended this turn, I could put a card from my hand of the top of the deck or the bottom of the deck, so I could take this and move it around. But I could react this way with an attack reaction. Now we move to the defense reaction. And so if the opponent had this springboard somersault in their hand, they could play this as a defense reaction for 0 cost. Because now on his turn, he can also pitch for resources, and he can play cards on the defense reaction. Now this deck, which is the Brute deck, does not have very many. I think it's only got 3 springboard somersaults in the generic. That's one thing we found out playing this, and my opponent, actually it was Kyle playing it a lot, got pretty frustrated with. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have many of those, so he's got to try to defend a lot up front. So there's different styles of play, and of course when you get into constructed and whatnot, you can change all that and put more reactions in there and everything else. But now that would be the defense reaction phase. Once the defense reaction phase ends, then we're good to go. The defense reaction phase now would conclude this chain link. So in this situation, I still have 2 resources. If I had another attack in my hand, so let's say we did this and 3 damage went through. He blocked 3. I'm sorry, well in this situation, he would take 5 damage because I pumped it again. But 5 damage would go through. He blocked 3 of it. So in this situation, what happens is this. The first thing is, well, for this specific situation, she's got an ability that when the attack hits, I can use it additional time if I have a go again. If you remember, I gave this weapon go again, so I could clear this chain up a little bit. I would lose this, and I could, and this is the only person who can do this. Your weapon, once you use it, it's gone for this round. You can't take it and attack with it again. You've only attacked once. Her special ability, if it hits the opponent, allows me to do it again. I would have to pay a resource again, and I can say, okay, now I'm going to attack on this chain for 3. And now the opponent again has to decide if they want to defend, and we go back through those defend, attack reaction, defense reaction, until we feel like we're in a good place or I can't do anymore, or neither of us can do anymore, and we end the turn. When the turn ends, or the attack phase ends, I'm sorry, I will move my weapon back to here. Anything that was played or defended with on the field goes to the graveyard. So the graveyard would go here, is above the deck. This is a void or a banished area. This would go to the opponent's graveyard. I lose all the resources that I have stored up. I don't get to keep those. The next thing that happens is anything that I pitched, I can put back on the bottom of my deck in any order, because when you're pitching a card, you're not playing a card. So when you're pitching a card, you're not playing it. When you're defending with a card, you're not playing it. Although when you defend with it, you lose it in the graveyard. When you pitch a card, I can pick the order and put these back on the bottom of my deck. Now in limited and sealed, that's pretty important because the decks are only 30 cards. So you're going to see those possibly come through your deck again. In constructed, it's a little bit different. You still could see them because in constructed, you play up to 40 life. So after that happens then, I put those back in the bottom of my deck. I have a choice that I can take a card from my hand and I can put it into what's called our arsenal. The arsenal is right here underneath Dorinthia, or whoever your hero is, and that card goes face down there, and it basically acts as like a 5th card in your hand, because now my next thing to do is draw up. I'm going to draw to 4. Now, both opponents on the first turn would draw to 4. So that person would draw back up to their intellect again. So saying 4 is wrong, because really the term is draw back up to your intellect, because it could change based on your hero. So they're going to draw back up on the first turn only. Subsequent turns, if I make an attack and my opponent spends a lot of their cards to defend, I draw up to my intellect. They don't get to. They may only have 1 card in their hand now, and that's a way that you can kind of keep pressure on, and that's that kind of back and forth feeling that you get with this game. So once we've done that, I've got a card in my arsenal. Now the card in my arsenal can only be played. You can only play a card from your arsenal, which means you pay its cost to play it. From your arsenal, you cannot defend with the card, and you cannot pitch a card for resources from your arsenal. You can only play a card from your arsenal. That's a very important distinction. So with all that, once we get to the end there, once we go through that, also one other quick thing, you can't pitch a card for no reason. So let's say it's my turn, or I'm at the end of my turn, I've got 2 cards. I've spent these 2 cards, I've got these 2 cards left, and I'm like, yeah, these are terrible. I'm going to pitch them, and that way I can draw 2 more. You can't do that. Anytime you pitch a card, you have to spend at least part of its resources on something. That's something that missed us for a little bit, because we thought we could cycle our deck a little bit in the first couple of games we played, until we realized that feels pretty broken, and then we looked and, oh yeah, you can't do that. So that's kind of how the gameplay works. Now my opponent would go after they've drawn up on the first turn, and then remember, subsequent turns, you only draw at the end of your turn. So that's kind of the quick set of this. Every card kind of interacts differently. It has different things you can do. The different decks have different styles, and it's a really fun game. I encourage you to go to a welcome event for this game. If you haven't, if you're in Shield Wall, we've got 2 of them coming up. And those dates are on the Shield Wall page on Facebook if you're interested in those, if you're a Shield Wall member watching this. And then we're doing the pre-release on 3/21 for the new release. So get in, get a welcome event under your belt, so that when we do the pre-release, you know exactly what's going on and you know how to play. So thanks very much for giving Shield Wall a chance. I appreciate it. Comment anything in the video. I'm sure I missed a few things, but again, this was kind of designed to be a little bit more general. And I'm going to link to a couple of more thorough how to play videos. Thanks so much.